ASE. Hope you are all keeping well. I know it has been a very cold snap coming through Australia at the moment. And yes, unfortunately, that means winter has well and truly settled in. Now, I really appreciate every email, question, comment that you have sent through this week. It has been a very full-on week for myself and the team here at AC. The rush that's coming into the end of financial year is certainly something we're all experiencing. I will certainly be posting a bit about that because you have asked a few questions around tax benefits in regards to spends before June 30. So please allow me to get some of those questions answered for you next week, and especially with someone who is more competent in that than I am. Now, a lot of you have asked this week in regards to 2FA, MFA, what is it, etc. And I guess it's one of the reasons why today's session is briefly around the concept of that. Now, we have talked about passwordless authentication previously in regards to that. So let me take one step back and answer the first question. 2FA, what does that stand for? Well, it stands for two-factor authentication. Now, in that regards, what that means is the ability for you to have something that you know and something that you own. Now, before I go into too much detail with that, I will then step next question, which is about multi-factor authentication. Now, that is exactly what it means. It can have a multiple level or layer of authentication. This could include, for example, a 2FA, i.e. two forms of authentication, or even one step further and making you do 3 levels or more of authentication. So if you hear the concepts banded around by 2FA or MFA, they are similar in the way they are. In the fact, the only difference is that MFA or multi-factor authentication means that you can have additional layers. That doesn't mean MFA doesn't apply to a two-factor authentication platform. So back to the point, something that you know, something that you own. So one of the questions I've had a lot of people ask about is, what is the most secure version of MFA? Now, when we talk about MFA, there are multitudes of ways to be able to authenticate. Now, let's start. What are some of the more common ones? Text messaging, very simple. Getting into a push notification to a device. So that means that you are asked to authenticate if it is you, sure. Then we have codes. So applications like Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, just as an example, you are given a rolling set of codes, which you then put into the web application that you're trying to authenticate with. And then finally, biometrics or even further security keys, for example. Now, they are just some of the examples, but they're the most prominent ones that we will see today. The one that I was talking about in the last one there, biometrics, is certainly what is the future in regards to passwordless and states where you are no longer going to be asked to use a name and password. You will be authenticated by a number of biometrics. This could be facial recognition, thumbprint, eye retina scans, you name it, they can be, plus voice recognition, etc. So there are, again, multi-layered behind that. And there is actually a whole alliance called the FIDO Alliance, which has a number of large organizations out there, including Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, supporting this whole push towards a passwordless authentication. Now, let's talk about those 4 topics that I just mentioned before. Text messaging. Wow. Now, whilst this is a super convenient way to authenticate you, it is not a very secure way to be authenticated. The reason being is that SIM swapping has become quite a large, let's call it cyber threat in regards to how people can access you and your personal identity by SIM swapping your phone. Now, previously, to SIM swap a card, you needed to have physical devices, and that was very possible to do. What you would do is you would just identify your specific SIM card by using a moderate amount of cyber threats. You could actually log in, replace your physical SIM card with the ID of an alternative SIM card that was stolen, allowing you as a, let's call it threat actor, to replicate your mobile device as if you were on a new device. And that means your phone number stops working on your mobile device. Suddenly this new mobile device that has been SIM swapped comes active. They can authenticate your personal information as a SIM swapped device, i.e. SMS authentication goes to this new device instead of going to your current device. So unfortunately, this is probably one of the least, let's call it secure ways of authenticating. Now, that doesn't mean it's not an easy one, but it does beg the question why banks still ask, as an option that you can use that, I would prominently suggest that you look at the alternatives that are out there. So push notifications, very simple. Devices generally have applications, the security applications around. So if you're talking about the Apple iOS platform, you certainly have, for example, Microsoft Authenticator, which allows you to push. And if you're talking about specific security platforms, namely as an example, Okta or other platforms that are out there like Ping, these platforms have applications that can be installed onto your device, which is then authenticated. And when you log into a platform, you are then asked to push notification to a device which has the application again installed and active as you to verify that it is you. Now, this is a very common platform security. You can see that on the Microsoft 365 platform, Google as well, the Gmail platform. And it is probably one of the more secure methods, being in the fact that you have to, one, have access to that app, and then secondly, running on the device and authenticating as you. So that is certainly a good way to make sure that you are using a more secure version of MFA or 2FA. Now we go again one step further and we're talking about application rolling code. So there are a lot of authenticator applications out there. You just need to look on the apps, app warehouses and stores, etc., on these platforms, for example, Android and Apple, and you'll see these. And what happens is that there is a specific QR code that you will then log your device to actually create an account or a rolling one-time password on these applications. So what happens is once you're authenticated during the login process, you are requested to punch in a security code. This security code often changes every 30 seconds, which makes it a little bit more encrypted and far more difficult to guess and get right. Now, the point being is even if your device was stolen and someone was trying to authenticate it from a remote location, you would be very hard guessed to get that number within 30 seconds right wherever you are. So again, one step further, using that sort of code, security code or authentication code is probably the least non-safe platform that you can look at right now. And then finally, we talk about biometrics. So that's again, something that you are, and in this case, so it can be something you know, something you own, or something you are. And this is that third level. So for example, this takes that whole biometric stage to the ability to, again, using passwords and usernames, then authenticating yourself from an alternative biometric type. Now, this can be, for most mobile devices, you have the option of multiple ways. You have a fingerprint scanner in most of the current smartphone devices, and then of course you've got facial recognition. So you will notice that if you are asked to authenticate, it may request an application to validate you via Face ID or from authenticating it via thumbprint. Could be a number of other methods depending on the levels of security. One could be a retina scan, for example. So that is that final level of security in the fact that it is very hard to replicate your facial recognition as well as your thumbprint. Doesn't mean that it's impossible, but it is a far more difficult task to do so, and therefore MFA using biometrics is probably one of the more secure, least popular versions out there, unless you are specifically already set up on a mobile device to authenticate you using it. You'll see most devices, for example, have passcodes, but also they're now offering thumbprint facial recognition. So therefore, it is probably an easy way to integrate into a platform and use that using an onboard application. Now, one step further to this, I've had a number of you reach out this week in regards to what are the sort of simple steps I need to be mindful on my mobile device to be a bit more secure. And a really interesting statistic back to the MFA is that only 35% of Australian businesses have multi-factor authentication turned on for all their corporate network applications. So, strong suggestion, if you can, reach out to your technology team, and if you are a manager or a director, please make sure that you're pushing that and making sure that that is something that is applied across as many applications as you can internally. In fact, it is a Microsoft statistic that says that over 90% of threats can be limited by applying multi-factor authentication. Back to the core applications on your mobiles. How do you be more safe? Now, one of the core factors about malware is that it installs and it applies itself on a device. Now, be it on a mobile device or on a desktop device. Best thing to protect yourself against that sort of engagement of a malware is to have as little applications that you can on a device. Now, if you're a mobile user, it is a generic statistic of around only 10% of the applications you have on your device are ever utilized. What does that mean? You probably have about 50 or 60 apps on your device that you don't use. So, the strong suggestion from a security perspective is if there is an application you do not use, delete it from your device. This could be from either your mobile or from your desktop. It is a strong suggestion to only have applications that you need installed on your device at any time. One, it's a security risk because that means you have to update, patch vulnerabilities on all these applications. And again, if there is no application to be taken advantage of, therefore it is a less of an opportunity for a vulnerability to enter your network or for someone to access your personal data on a mobile device. Now, thank you so much to everyone for sending these tips through, these questions, I should say, so that I can answer these for you. It is certainly my pleasure to do so. I know there's going to be a number of questions that come around in the next few weeks. I'll certainly be trying to answer and address those as I always do. Feel free to comment below. I will get back to your questions when I can. Feel free to send messages directly to myself on any of the platforms that you see this on, and I will respond as soon as I can. Now, in the meantime, please be safe out there. As I like to say, think before you click, turn on multi-factor authentication, have you a fantastic weekend, and I'll see you all